The colony of Athane 9 burned beneath a blood-red sky. The mining complex screamed with alarms as plasma fire poured from shattered reactors. Flames climbed the metallic towers like living serpents. Turning night into a cruel dawn, aliens ran through smoke, their silver eyes wide with terror. Some called for loved ones. Others simply vanished into the fire. Through that chaos moved a human named Elias Ward. He was a maintenance engineer, covered in soot and sweat. His breathing mask cracked, but still working. He had come to Athane 9 for work, never for heroism. But when the ground trembled and the screams rose, something in him refused to run. He pushed against the stampede, shouting for survivors. His boots sinking in molten dust inside the refinery's north wing. A small shape moved beneath fallen beams, a child, no higher than his chest. Her skin faintly glowing blue under the smoke, Elias heard a weak cough, followed by a small cry. Without thinking, he threw his tools aside and ran toward the sound. Every step burned his soles. Every breath tasted like metal and ash. A support beam blocked the corridor. He braced himself and heaved, the metal biting into his hands. Pain tore through him, but the beam shifted, just enough for him to crawl through. There she was, an alien girl, pinned under debris, her tiny arms trembling. Her eyes glowed gold, filled with fear and fading light. "Hold on, kid," he said, his voice shaking. She didn't understand his words, but she heard his tone when he tried to lift the beam. Fire rolled across the wall behind him. He used his body to shield her as a pressure wave slammed them both. His left hand caught the full blast, the glove melting, flesh searing. He screamed, but didn't stop. The beam finally gave way, and he dragged her free. The roof cracked open, spilling fire and dust onto his shoulders. He wrapped her in his jacket and ran toward the exit. Every step was agony, but the thought of leaving her there hurt worse. Outside, alien soldiers had formed a perimeter. They saw him emerge, a human carrying one of their kind. Their weapons rose instantly, blue energy humming in the smoke. Elias stopped, his burned arm limp, the girl clutching his neck. She opened her mouth and cried out in her language, a single sharp word that froze them all. The soldiers looked at each other, then lowered their rifles. One of them shouted into a comlink, panic flooding his voice. Elias didn't know what was happening. He only knew the girl was alive, coughing softly against his chest. He fell to his knees as med drones rushed forward. The last thing he saw before blacking out was the girl's face, tears glowing faintly on her skin, her golden eyes locked on his. He didn't hear her whisper his name for the first time. He didn't see the mark on her arm, a royal sigil that would shake empires. All he felt was the warmth of her tiny hand holding his burned fingers. Hours later, in orbit, battleships drifted above Athane 9, their hulls marked with the crest of the Varine Empire. The Empress herself watched the flames through a holofeed, her expression unreadable. A single report came through: "The air is alive, saved by a human." Her eyes narrowed, and a whisper passed through the command deck like thunder. Back on the surface, Elias lay in a medical pod aboard a rescue vessel, his left hand gone, replaced with bandages and pain. He stirred awake to see the alien girl sitting beside him. She held a glowing sphere between her palms, its light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. When she noticed him watching, she smiled faintly, whispering, "Lyra." Elias blinked, unsure if she was telling him her name. He tried to sit up, but the medic pushed him gently back. "Easy, human," the alien nurse said, her tone softer than he expected. "You're lucky to be alive," she added. Glancing at the girl, Elias only nodded, his eyes drifting back to Lyra. Outside the viewport, the planet still burned. Columns of smoke rose into the black. Turning the stars into red dots, Elias felt hollow, wondering how many others hadn't made it out. He whispered to himself that saving one life was still worth everything. He didn't know that the life he saved was about to change the fate of galaxies. As the ship left Athen 9's orbit, unknown signals echoed in the void. Encrypted transmissions moved from ship to ship, spreading one message: the royal bloodline lives. Guarded by a Terran, the Empress's fleets began to move, and deep inside the medbay, the little girl who once trembled in the fire held the human's good hand and whispered softly. "Thank you," Elias smiled, though he didn't understand her words. To him, it was just a child's gratitude. Nothing more, but to the galaxy, it was the beginning of a legend. The story of the human who dragged an alien princess from the fire, unaware that his act of mercy had just lit a fire far greater than the one that nearly killed him. The cargo ship Windfall drifted through the outer rim of the Varine system. Its hull was patched with old plates, engines humming like a tired animal. Inside, the corridors smelled of oil and recycled air. The crew moved quietly, trying to forget the flames of Athen 9. Elias Ward sat in the medbay, his left arm wrapped in metal and cables. The replacement hand wasn't a real one, just a prototype graft the medics could build in time. He turned it slowly, watching the mechanical fingers twitch like they were learning what life meant. Each movement sent a small spark of pain through his shoulder, but he didn't care. Pain was better than emptiness. Across from him, the alien girl sat cross-legged on the bed. Her name was Lyra. Though she spoke it so softly, it almost vanished in the air. Her golden eyes glowed faintly in the ship's dim light. She hadn't spoken much since the rescue. Only short words in her language. Elias didn't understand her, but somehow he knew what she meant. She followed him everywhere. If he moved to the engine room, she sat near the tools. If he went to eat, she took the seat beside him and watched him eat with wide curiosity. Sometimes she laughed at his clumsy mechanical hand, a sound so gentle it broke the silence in the ship. The crew didn't mind her, but they didn't ask questions either. Captain Rhea, a tall alien with gray scales and sharp blue eyes, walked into the medbay. She looked at Lyra, then at Elias. "You realize what kind of trouble this is, right?" she said. Elias nodded, knowing where this was going. "We weren't supposed to take survivors from Athen 9, she continued. "But the girl refused to leave without you." Elias sighed and rubbed his forehead. "She's just a kid," he said, his voice rough. Rhea crossed her arms. "Maybe. But she's not any ordinary child." She tossed a datapad onto the table, the news flickering on the screen. The headline read, "Explosion on Athen 9. Imperial heiress missing." Elias stared at it, not believing what he was reading. The image was blurred, but the eyes, those golden eyes, looked too familiar. He turned slowly toward Lyra. She blinked and tilted her head, as if sensing what he had just discovered. "She's the Empress's daughter," Rhea whispered, her voice trembling. "And we're harboring her on a ship without registration in Varine space." Elias didn't speak. He just looked at Lyra again. She looked back, silent, her little hands clutching his sleeve. She knew what he knew now, and fear flashed across her face. Rhea continued, "We should hand her over before the patrols catch us." Elias shook his head immediately. "No, I pulled her out of that fire. I'm not giving her to anyone." "You don't understand," Rhea said. "They'll kill you for touching royal blood, and they'll burn the ship to dust." Elias clenched his teeth. "Then they'll have to catch me first." Rhea stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You humans really are insane," she muttered before walking out. When the door closed, Lyra reached out and touched his metal hand. Her small voice trembled as she said something in her language. The translator implant caught half of it. Safe. Promise. Thank you. Elias smiled weakly. You're safe now, kid, he said. He didn't know if she understood. But her eyes softened, and that was enough. Days passed as the windfall drifted between asteroid belts. Varine patrols filled the space channels, scanning every vessel. The crew hid their signal and turned off main lights, flying like ghosts through the dark, sometimes through the thin walls. Elias heard Lyra crying in her sleep. He'd sit near her bed until the trembling stopped. One night, while he was fixing the oxygen filters, a soft alarm buzzed. Rhea's voice echoed through the comms. Imperial scanners ahead, all crew silent. Elias pulled Lyra into a storage bay, hiding her behind a stack of metal crates. Outside, the ship's lights dimmed to red, the engines whispering to silence. A beam of blue light passed through the hull. Scanning every room, Lyra held her breath. Clutching his arm, the scanner paused near them, then moved on. After a few seconds, the light faded and the engines came back alive. The patrol ship turned away, leaving them in the dark. Elias exhaled, his heart racing. Close one, he whispered. Lyra finally spoke again, her voice low. Why? Elias blinked. Why what? She looked up, her golden eyes shining. Why save me? He hesitated, not knowing how to answer. Because you were there, he said simply. Because no one else did, she smiled faintly. And for the first time, she placed her hand over his chest. Her small voice whispered, You? Fire. Elias laughed softly, not knowing she meant, You are fire that saves, in her tone. At that same moment, far away on the Royal Fleet's command bridge, the Empress stood before a holographic map. A glowing line tracked the windfall's path through the outer rim. Find them, she ordered, her voice calm but sharp as glass. They have my blood. The Royal Fleet moved silently across the stars, their lights cutting through darkness, and deep in the cargo hold of a forgotten ship. A wounded human and a lost princess shared quiet laughter, neither of them knowing that the next time they saw those lights, the galaxy itself would change. The human had become more than a rescuer now. He was a fugitive, a protector, and unknowingly, the spark that would set the Empire aflame. And Lyra, the child of stars, watched him with the kind of faith that only grows from being saved by fire. Outside, space shimmered like a sea of silver dust, and the windfall disappeared into it, carrying two souls that destiny refused to let go. The stars outside the ship shimmered like cold diamonds. The windfall moved silently between dead moons and dust clouds. Avoiding every patrol, the galaxy had become smaller for Elias and Lyra. Hunted from every system, their names were not known, but their faces were whispered about in encrypted channels. Elias sat in the cockpit, eyes half closed, listening to the hum of the engines. His new mechanical hand twitched now and then, reminding him of what he had lost. He stared at the fading blue glow of Athane 9 on the screen, a memory that refused to fade. Behind him, Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, holding a small holographic cube. It projected faint images of stars and people she once knew, a family she could never return to. Outside, the Varine Royal Fleet spread across the sector like a net. Dreadnoughts drifted through the void, sending pulses that echoed across space. Their command channels repeated one coded message again and again. Return the royal blood, or be destroyed. In the deep dark of the bridge, the Empress stood before her commanders, her face calm, but her voice sharp. She is alive, protected by a Terran, she said. Her advisors murmured in disbelief. A human saved the air, one whispered. That species should have been extinct on the frontier. The Empress's eyes flashed cold. Never underestimate them, she replied. History has already punished those who did, back on the windfall. Captain Rhea leaned over the radar. "More scanners in Sector 8, she muttered. "They're closing the perimeter," Elias frowned. "How far to neutral space?" Rhea's tail flicked nervously. 3 jumps. "If we don't get caught first." Lyra tugged at Elias's sleeve, whispering softly. "They find us soon." Her voice trembled like broken glass that night. Elias found her sitting alone near the cargo bay window, stars reflected in her golden eyes. Her small hands trembling. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Dreams." "Bad ones?" He sat beside her, staring into the endless dark. "When I was your age," he said quietly, "I had dreams too. Fire, noise." "Losing people?" Lyra looked up at him. "You lost family?" He nodded slowly. "War took everything. But it couldn't take who I am." She didn't answer, but leaned her head against his arm. For a moment, the galaxy felt quiet. Then the alarm screamed. Multiple ships approaching fast. Rhea's voice roared through the intercom. Elias jumped to his feet. Lyra followed, clutching the edge of his jacket. Outside, the void lit up with flashes of red. 6 Varine interceptors had found them, moving like predators in the dark. Rhea's hands flew across the controls. "Hold on. This will be rough." The windfall dove into an asteroid field, rocks spinning past like knives. Energy bolts sliced through the darkness, missing them by meters. Elias grabbed the side panel and shouted, "Divert power to shields." "I'm trying." Rhea yelled back, "But their lock is too strong." Lyra's eyes glowed brighter as she stood near the viewport. She closed her hands together and whispered in her native tongue. A faint pulse of golden light rippled through the ship. The enemy's targeting systems flickered, their weapons losing aim for a moment. Elias stared at her, shocked. "What did you just do?" She looked frightened. "Can't explain." "Just help." The windfall shot forward, slipping behind an asteroid and vanishing from scanners. For a moment, silence returned. Only the heartbeat of the engines filled the air. Rhea exhaled. "We lost them," she said. Elias turned to Lyra. "That thing you did, what was it?" She hesitated, then said, "Royal blood can command Varine tech." Her voice was small. "I used it to confuse them." Elias rubbed the back of his neck. "You saved us again, kid, but across the stars." The Empress's ships were not blind. One of the dreadnoughts intercepted the signal pulse from Lyra's gift. A commander saluted the Empress. "We found her trail." "Majesty." The Empress nodded slowly. "Then begin the hunt." Hours later, the windfall landed on a forgotten moon called Daro 5. A place filled with caves and shadows, once a human mining outpost long abandoned. Elias and Rhea checked their supplies, while Lyra explored the silent corridors. On the walls were faded words written in English. "Humanity endures," she whispered, tracing the letters with her fingers. She didn't understand the language fully, but the words felt heavy, powerful, as they prepared to leave. A new signal flashed on their sensors. Dozens of ships dropping out of warp nearby. Rhea's eyes widened. "They found us already." Elias clenched his fists. "No running this time." He turned to Lyra. "Stay close, no matter what happens," she nodded, though her eyes were full of fear. In the distance, the dark sky filled with blue light as the royal fleet descended. Dust storms rose as the dreadnoughts entered orbit. Lyra's breathing quickened. "They bring the mother," she whispered. Elias looked at her in confusion. "The Empress herself?" She nodded slowly. "She comes for me." The air trembled as a beam of light shot from the largest ship. It struck the ground far beyond the ridge. Forming a shimmering gate, Elias shielded his eyes from the glow. Through that portal stepped figures of gold and armor, and behind them, a tall woman with eyes like burning suns. The Empress had arrived. Elias felt his heart pounding. He stood between the girl and the army that came to claim her. He didn't understand politics, bloodlines, or galactic thrones. All he knew was that he had made a promise in the fire, to protect the small hand that once held his burned fingers, and now, in the dust of a dying moon, he would keep that promise. The hunt was over. The reckoning had begun, and somewhere in the stars, the galaxy itself held its breath, because a single human stood in the way of an empire, and he didn't plan to move. The sky above Darrow 5 cracked with thunder as the Varine fleet descended. Blue light rippled across the barren moon, and dust rose in great swirling storms. Elias stood on a rocky ridge beside the windfall, his metal hand gripping a plasma rifle. Beside him, Lyra watched silently, her golden eyes reflecting the storm. The wind tugged at her white cloak, making her look fragile and small. But Elias had seen her courage before, and he knew better. From the heart of the storm, a massive portal opened. Golden-armored soldiers poured through, forming ranks with perfect precision. Behind them walked a figure taller than all others, her presence bending the air itself. Her crown glowed with light from another world, her expression calm and terrible. The Empress of Varine had arrived. The soldiers raised their weapons, aiming at the human and the child. Elias stepped forward, shielding Lyra with his body. His voice rang across the dust. "She's under my protection," the commander sneered. "Human, step aside. You do not know who you guard." Elias didn't move, his metal hand tightening on the rifle. "I don't care who she is," he said. "I'm not letting you hurt her." Before the commander could reply, a soft sound broke the silence. Lyra stepped from behind Elias, her eyes glowing brighter than the storm itself. She raised her small hands, and a golden wave spread across the ground. Every soldier froze in place, their armor flickering with static light. Her voice, usually soft, now echoed with royal power. "Enough?" she said, her language clear, carrying command no one could deny. The soldiers dropped to one knee instantly, their weapons lowered, their visors darkened. Elias looked at her, confused and breathless. "Lyra, what's happening?" he asked. She turned to him, tears in her golden eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't tell you who I am." The Empress stepped forward, her long robe trailing through the dust. Her voice was calm, but heavy with emotion. "Daughter," she said, "you've caused a storm across the stars." Lyra lowered her head. "I didn't mean to, Mother." Her voice trembled like a whisper. "I only wanted to live." Elias's mind raced. He stared at the two of them, the Empress and the little girl he had pulled from the fire. The truth burned through him like lightning. She wasn't just a child, she was the heir of the Varine Empire, and he had carried her across borders, through fire and through death itself. The Empress turned to him, her golden eyes sharp as blades. "You are the Terran who saved her," she said slowly. Elias nodded, his jaw tight. "I am. Why?" she asked. "You knew she wasn't one of your kind." He looked her straight in the eye. "Because no one else was there. She was just a child in pain." That was reason enough. The silence that followed stretched like eternity. Then the Empress stepped closer, her aura dimming, her voice softening. "You lost your hand saving her," she said. Elias looked at his metal arm and shrugged. "Better my hand than her life." A small smile touched her lips, the first anyone had seen in years. She turned to her guards, her tone icy again. "Lower your weapons. He is not our enemy." The soldiers obeyed without a sound. Elias blinked, unsure what to say. Lyra ran to her mother, but before reaching her, she turned back and held out her hand to him. He hesitated, then took it, standing between royalty and ruin. The Empress looked at that joined hand, human and royal blood together. For a moment, something ancient moved in her eyes. She spoke to her daughter softly. "You trust him that much?" Lyra nodded. "He saved me when no one else did." The Empress turned back to Elias. "Then what do you want, human?" He paused, unsure how to answer. He could have asked for wealth, ships, anything, but all he said was, "Free the human workers on your colonies." The Empress blinked in surprise. "That's your wish?" Elias nodded slowly. "You owe me nothing else." But they deserve to live free. For the first time, the Empress was silent. Then she raised her hand and spoke into her comlink. "Order all Terran laborers to be released immediately," she commanded. Her generals hesitated, but her glare silenced them. Elias watched in disbelief as the message echoed through the fleet. It was done with just a few words. Lyra smiled and hugged her mother tightly. The Empress placed a gentle hand on her daughter's head, then turned back to Elias. "You have changed more than you realize." "Human," she said quietly. "Your fire has touched the stars." Elias looked down, unsure how to respond. "I just did what anyone should," he murmured. The Empress's eyes softened again. "Few beings in this galaxy would risk everything for another," she said. "Even fewer would ask nothing in return." Elias gave a small smile. "Guess humans are stubborn that way." For the first time, the Empress laughed, a sound that startled even her guards. As the storm cleared, the Empress turned to leave. Lyra walked beside her, but kept looking back at Elias. When the portal opened again, she ran back and hugged him tightly. "Goodbye, Elias," she whispered. "You will not be forgotten." He smiled and touched her shoulder gently. "Stay safe, kid." And then she was gone. Walking into light brighter than the fire that once tried to take her, Elias stood alone on the empty ridge. The windfall behind him, the stars above burning quietly. He didn't realize yet that the story had just begun, because across the galaxy, his name was already being spoken in secret. The human who stood before an empire and made it bow. The one who saved a princess and changed a throne. The warships of the Varine Empire drifted away from Darrow 5. The light from their engines faded into the black sea of stars. Silence returned to the moon, broken only by the hum of the windfall. Elias stood beside the ship, staring at the empty sky where the Empress and her daughter had vanished. His burned arm ached, but his heart felt heavier than the metal graft it carried. He had done what he could, and now it was over, or so he thought. But destiny wasn't finished with the human who had dragged a princess from the fire. Days turned into weeks as the windfall traveled through quiet trade routes. Captain Rhea stayed silent most of the time, watching Elias fix things that didn't need fixing. The crew spoke softly about what had happened, never sure if it was real or myth already. Rumors had begun spreading faster than ships could fly. Some said a human defied an Empress and lived. Others claimed the Empress bowed to a Terran. No one knew the truth. But the name Elias Ward was whispered with awe in hidden corners of the galaxy. The freed human miners spoke his name like a prayer. In Varine courts, nobles argued about what the Empress had done, but no one dared challenge her, because she had declared it herself. A debt to a human paid in full. One evening, Elias sat alone in the mess hall, staring at the stars through the viewport. The hum of the engines was soft, almost peaceful. He lifted his cup, but his thoughts were far away. He remembered the girl's small hand clutching his in the fire. Her laugh, her courage, her golden eyes that had looked at him like he mattered. Still thinking about her? Rhea asked, stepping into the room. Elias smiled faintly. "Guess I am. She's royalty now," Rhea said. Sitting down. "You won't see her again," Elias shrugged. "I didn't save her to be seen again." Rhea studied him quietly, then said, "You're a strange man, Elias Ward." He chuckled. "Yeah, I've heard that before." The next morning, a signal reached the windfall, encrypted, ancient. carrying the seal of the Varine throne. Rhea nearly dropped her datapad when she saw it. "It's from the Empress herself," she whispered. Elias frowned. "Read it." The message appeared in golden light. "To the Terran, known as Elias Ward," it began. "You are summoned to the capital world of Varine Prime. By decree of the throne." Rhea stared at him. "Are you going?" Elias looked out the viewport. Watching the stars drift by, he nodded slowly. "Yeah. Guess I owe her a visit." 2 months later, the Windfall entered orbit above Varine Prime, a massive planet wrapped in golden clouds and endless cities. Its atmosphere shimmered with energy fields strong enough to crush fleets. And yet, when the human ship arrived, no defense guns fired. Instead, a single royal escort guided them through the skies. Elias stepped off the ramp onto a marble platform that seemed to float on light. Thousands of alien eyes watched in silence. He could feel their curiosity, their disbelief. A lone human walking freely in the heart of the Empire. The doors of the royal palace opened, and there she was, Lyra. No longer the frightened girl he had carried through flames. She was taller now, wearing royal armor etched with gold. Her eyes still glowed like twin suns, but her smile was the same. She walked toward him and bowed slightly. "Welcome back, Elias," she said softly. He blinked, surprised. "You don't bow to me, kid." She laughed. "I'm not a kid anymore," he smiled. "No." "You're not." The Empress appeared beside her daughter, her steps slow but graceful. She looked at Elias with calm respect. "Human," she said. "The galaxy remembers your fire." Elias lowered his head politely. "I didn't light anything, Your Majesty. I just pulled a child from a burning room." The Empress's eyes softened, and that single act burned through history. She gestured toward the vast hall behind her. A great mural now covered the wall. Painted in golden light, it showed the night of Athan 9, a human figure carrying a small alien girl through the flames. At the bottom, the words glowed in both Terran and Varine script. "Honor needs no bloodline." Elias stared at it, speechless. Lyra smiled. "I told them to write it that way," she whispered. He turned to her. "You shouldn't have." She shook her head. "I wanted them to remember who you are." The Empress stepped closer. "You asked for freedom for your kind," she said. "That was an act of courage and mercy. And it has changed everything." Elias didn't know what to say. He only nodded. The Empress smiled faintly. "Now my daughter asks one more favor." Lyra looked up at him, her voice soft. "Come back to serve as ambassador between Varine and humanity." Elias blinked, taken aback. "An ambassador?" She nodded. "Someone who can teach both sides what it means to be human." He chuckled quietly. "I'm not sure the galaxy's ready for that." Lyra grinned. "Then it's the perfect time." He thought for a long moment, then smiled. "All right, but no crowns, no thrones." "Just me, just you," she said. Still smiling, the Empress bowed her head once. "Then it is done." That night, Elias stood on the balcony of his new quarters. The lights of Varine Prime shimmered below like an ocean of stars. He looked at his metal hand, then at the sky. He thought of fire, of screams, of a little girl he once carried through death. And he whispered to himself, maybe it was all worth it, far away. In the halls of the palace, Lyra watched him through a window, her voice soft as she spoke to the stars. "Thank you." Human, the galaxy would remember his name for ages. Some would call him a hero, others a myth, but to her, and to those who knew the truth, he was simply Elias Ward, the man who had saved a princess, defied an empire, and reminded the stars what humanity meant. And as the wind moved through the towers of the Varine capital, the fire that began on Athan 9 still burned quietly, not of destruction, but of hope, the kind only a human could ignite.